folks, we distributed the agenda yesterday, and I believe the agenda is also on our website. But our first order of business today is review of and vote on the February 27th meeting minutes. Those were shared with the committee in an email yesterday, I believe. Were folks able to review those minutes? I got a lot of emails saying folks had a chance. All right, so if I could get a motion to vote. Steve Marquis, second. Bruce, Lieutenant Scott, all in favor? Any? Great. Okay, I show unanimous. All right, terrific. I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Scott to give us an update on LD 2159.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So LD 2159 has kind of morphed a little bit. So I handed out the most recent amendment that we have. Disregarding my chicken scratch that's on there, I made some notes as I was listening yesterday. So essentially what's happened is we were asked if the commission could meet and look through Title 29A and come back to them with recommendations on changes on just the operational portion, so the behavior of the school bus operator. So from 2301 through 2311 in Title 29A. So I looked through, did my best to try to encompass some of the preliminary conversations that we have had to find a way to codify what we know to be fairly standard practice and what we hope to make sure is being followed out there when it comes to the boarding and deboarding of children. So if you look through the amendment, they have included the first thing I think most of you are aware of is they had asked that this commission be extended to be a permanent commission. They liked what we were doing, and they thought that it would be good if we could report back to them at least annually to discuss any new issues, concerns, or topics. So the heavy lift is obviously going to be right now, and the initial report back. The report backs are going to be February 1st of every following year. If nothing's changed, then there won't be a whole lot to report back. But if things have been brought to our attention and we have an opportunity to make some recommended changes, or certainly with the best practices they want to hear from us, they're going to probably approve this bill fairly close to as it's written and hope that it has the desired effect. If it doesn't, they want this group to be able to meet, discuss it, and to try to fine tune it and report back to the next legislature, which will be the 133. So if the bill passes, we will become a permanent commission. They struck out language in Title 29A that said a school bus of model year 2021 or newer must be equipped with a crossing arm. And now they want any bus to be equipped with a crossing arm, regardless of its year. I think that we were all in agreement that made sense. If there's going to be money available to make safety improvements and enhancements on the buses, I don't think there's anybody in this room that would say that crossing arm is probably a priority and one of the most important things that we could do. So they're going to push forward with that. It sounds like there was at least unanimous support in the room from what I could tell to move forward with that. They did remove the anti-pinch sensors for now. I think they're hoping that if this commission makes the recommendation at the end that they be retrofitted with them, that there will be funding available to the governor's office to take care of it. But I feel like there was enough controversy that they wanted to pull it out and let us do the work on it. So one thing that they added that's very important is, in addition to requiring that the crossing arm be on a bus, so the bus is equipped with it, you actually have to use it. They didn't think when they passed the law in 2019 that they would have to say, if it's equipped with it, you also have to use it. They felt like if we just require it to be equipped with, then the bus drivers would know they have to use it. And so this is taking it a step further because they recognize that desire or wish or legislative intent wasn't being followed. So the requirement, if this passes, will be that you shall use the crossing arm anytime you're boarding or deboarding children. And there was some language that you'll see that I added. Everything that's underlined, for those that are familiar reading amendments, would be new language. It says the operator of a school bus equipped with a school bus crossing arm shall activate the school bus crossing arm while the school bus is stopped to receive or discharge passengers. And then if you go to the next paragraph down, so it's on the second page, and these are double-sided, the back page, on receiving and discharging passengers, we had added the red signal lights, stop arm, and the crossing arm must be activated and in use while receiving or discharging passengers. The crossing arm may be disabled only while on school property when the driver determines it would cause greater harm or damage to use the crossing. So in other words, use the crossing arm at all times. The only exception would be, the way it's written right now, is on school property and in the opinion of the driver, it would cause greater harm or damage to use it. So if there's one bus in a parking lot, use it. If there's 14 buses in a parking lot, then you opening it up is going to hit the bus in front of you or pinch somebody that might be trying to get through, then you would not use it. The committee has asked me to work with Melanie to change the language a little bit because they want it to really be for any parking area. So not just school property, but anytime they go into a parking area, because that's their will. Certainly going to work with them to change the language. And what I'm going to recommend is it just says the crossing arm may be disabled only while in a parking area. And then the rest of it will remain the same. As long as everybody's good with it. If there's questions, please ask.
I was just going to ask, last time we were talking, my recollection was that there was also a concern at railroad crossings. Did that come up?
So it did. And I heard you were at a railroad crossing, you wouldn't have. And you're not deboarding at the railroad crossing. So I don't think it needs to be in here, and it's not right now, okay. But I know it was mentioned. They also seem to agree that they liked any violation to be a traffic violation, not a criminal violation within this area. So if you fail to use the crossing arm as a bus driver, you can be ticketed for a traffic violation, not arrested for a Class C crime. This was what was in the original drafting. And then the rest of the language is really just requiring that the committee or this commission become permanent. I think the only other thing that is important, I believe it was already a practice that was followed, but they codify in statute now that the bus may not be in motion any time while the door is open. I don't think that they're driving around with the doors open, but certainly it takes a little bit longer to wait for the door to close. And waiting a little bit longer, I will tell you, probably wouldn't have made a huge difference in the two tragedies that we're talking about. Just taking that extra 2 to 3 seconds for a door to close completely before a bus is in motion. And so that was also added. Any questions at all about operationally? Yes.
Sorry, not so much about operational, but in terms of a phase-in period, yes. That was something that doesn't appear to be in the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. So that was brought up yesterday, and somebody recommended January 1st, and they agreed to have that added as an amendment. I'm hoping to get more information today to see if that's enough time. If it's not enough time, and we can go back to the transportation committee and let them know that. I think that they are agreeable. They want to do this right, but they don't want to allow 2 or 3 years for implementation because it's inconvenient. They would prefer to be as strict and as short of a turnaround period as possible, but they also want to be realistic and not have 40, 50, 250 buses that are put out of service January 1st of 2027. That's not their goal either. But they do want to do this sooner than later. So if we hear back today from our vendors that that's a reasonable time frame, then I think we can leave it alone. If we hear back that it's not a reasonable time frame, then we're going to have to figure out what is reasonable.
Scott, can I ask, because I missed the beginning of that parking lot.
Yes.
I understand when buses are lined up in a schoolyard that there's lots of adults out there supervising children moving back and forth, and the buses all roll at the same time. Or at least that's how it was in the schools I worked. Why the other parking lots were there if they were going on a field trip not utilize all of our safety equipment in a parking with students coming on and off the bus.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that was a point of contention. The original language that I had was only on school property for that reason.
Right.
There was some pushback from members of the committee saying, well, what about other parking lots? We don't want to have to come back and do this again over and over again. So how about if they went to, and they used an example, Fort Knox here in Augusta. It's a small parking lot. You can only fit 2 buses in. What if they had 3 buses? And now you got one that's stopped out in the middle of the road because you're requiring them to use the crossing. And I said we had considered, and we certainly contemplated what we felt would be the most safe practice. We believed that on school property, it made sense to allow a driver to disable the crossing arm. It didn't make sense on any public way. And the majority of parking areas we felt wouldn't have that same compression issue. We didn't feel like there would be multiple buses at any one time. They were not happy with that answer. I think it really turned into them trying to find a way to cover every issue or grievance they had heard during the public hearing, and that was coming out as what about other parking areas. So I did hear from a senior member of their committee that they recommended maybe just all parking lots, which the language would be changed to parking areas because that's already defined in statute. So that's kind of where they left it yesterday. I would be more than happy to go back if this commission feels like that is opening up a can of worms to some unintended consequences. I would be more than happy to tell them that that's what we had discussed. But for yesterday, that's what they wanted. I left it alone, hoping that we could at least get this law passed with the emergency preamble to require the driving behavior to take effect immediately and at least do something right now, and then have that phase-in period for the safety equipment.
Can I make one personal comment?
Yes, sir.
When I think about the school parking lot, I think you might have discussed this. I think of like a high school state outdoor track meet where the kids from 50 different schools or more going to one place in a large school parking lot. When people are racing to try to find parking spots, I think that would be the example of there could be some real serious danger at a huge event when you're converging on one area. Or cross-country meets when you have a state meet with 3 different classes, you have 150 schools present with buses. So just a caution that. A more global concern that was when I presented the work of this committee last week to the executive committee for in school management, the school board, the superintendent's group, specific to the phase-in period. So it'll be interesting to hear what Brian Cressy and Matt Kern shared today, because there were some superintendents from various around the state that are very concerned with the retrofit time period, warranty, ensuring that we're in compliance. And one superintendent from a region shared that they had been informed that only 1 bus per month is pretty much the schedule that they could get completed because there's some workflow challenges. So it'll be interesting to hear from at least a few of the vendors today what they see as that timeline, because there's unanimous support to have buses retrofitted, but the timeline is a question, and the ultimate cost can be achieved with what's proposed for funding to do so. Those are 2 questions.
And I'm glad you brought that up as well. Those are all conversations that have taken place around the horseshoe, and they just want a solid answer from the commission on what is reasonable. They don't want to create a law that is going to be either enforceable or practical, and they don't want to put a bunch of buses on service. They just want to make sure that we push this as fast as possible and not try to do it over, say, 2 or 3 budget cycles, when you can afford it, kind of a thing. They've started asking about if the funding's available, are you going to be able to get reimbursed? And if the districts can afford it, can they do the work now and then they get reimbursed later? And we just don't have those answers yet. The governor has to submit the budget, and then they have to make a decision on how that's going to be used or distributed, and I'm not sure what their thought is. I'm not sure if anyone else has heard anything in this group on how they intend to disperse that money.
So the greatest challenge, I think, is, again, everyone's in support, that I'm aware of. It's the workflow during the summer would be ideal, but it's gonna be if there are 1,500 buses, having the manpower, the power to do that. Because in many districts, can't have buses offline. There are no real surplus of buses in many school districts in Maine. So trying to prioritize those places that really not have a bus offline was also the same.
I agree. I think we need to be careful with that date that we do set. I will tell you that my experience dealing with the legislature over the last 10 years, if we have a honest, sincere effort to comply with the end date, and we have to go back in January or February of next year and ask for an extension, they have worked with us very well in the past on changing and making amendments. But I think this group has to give a realistic time frame as well so that I can report back to them.
Yeah, and certainly one of the concerns would be that if we say January 1, they're not in session to be able to go back to say, hey, we're worried we're not going to be able to make it. So
I agree. When they said that, I was in the back of the room and I'm going, I hope we can get called back up so I can ask them to at least put it in February when we're back in session. And I was not called back up. So I think we're going to get some time in front of them again, and I'll bring all this back up. So that's really everything that we have for amendments on 2115. It's just ensuring that the behavior that we think is important is codified in statute. If everybody had a chance to review it, at least the amendments, if there's no, did you have something?
Yeah, that's right. We have listened in the public discourse, but I don't think local or even if investigators have put out conclusions, I think.
Not so the NTSB has put out their conclusions, but they're very general and broad terms. The actual investigations are still ongoing, and so we really can't talk much about the current investigation and what that outcome is. I will tell you that I have enough information to know that if we don't address driving behavior in human error, we're not going to solve the problems, because these obviously involve more than technology. If technology itself could solve the problems, then that would be great. But I think we have to make sure that we figure out a way to maintain and increase driver vigilance in addition to adding safety equipment. And when this all boils down, and that what we were able to talk about it, that's what you're going to probably all agree to. Is there's some driving behavior that has to be.
Yeah, so I suspect you had insights of what's down right now. And I think that's the big first thing that I would think the commission would normally take those inputs in and say, okay, now based on this finding, let's go forward and try to modify. So obviously that would be working with subsequent gatherings once those things are public. But for right now, yes, your sense that this is the best early attempt for this legislative session based on what we think happened.
Yes, yeah, that was my opinion, sir. Okay. And I told the committee the same thing. I feel like if we can change the driving behavior immediately, if the buses weren't allowed to move with the door open, and if we followed the statute and had some enforcement of not allowing the bus to move until the children were seated, that would be very helpful, because that would have given that extra 3, 4, 5 seconds to make sure that everybody is seated and that there's no obstructions before you start moving your bus. And we've never really had any method of enforcement before, and I think that was the goal of this transportation committee, was to say, how can you enforce it? What can law enforcement do? And if they don't make it a traffic infraction, we can't do anything. Okay. Yes, you're welcome. Is there any other questions or comments on that? Did everyone get a chance to at least read the amendment? And are you comfortable with the language? The only language I want to know if you're comfortable with is the bus may not be in motion at any time while the door is open. Does everybody feel like that is appropriate?
I do. Yeah.
And then, does everyone feel like if the sentence that I added under Title 29A, Section 2308, subsection 1, it already has the requirements there that the operator shall activate a flashing light at least 100 feet before the stop is made to restrict or discharge children. It already says these lights must be continually displayed until after the bus has received or discharged passengers. But that next sentence, if everybody's comfortable with that, I'd like to know that too. The red signal lights, the stop arm and crossing arm must be activated and used while receiving or discharging passengers. And then the crossing arm may be disabled only. We can leave it only while on school property when the driver determines it would cause greater harm or damage to use the crossing arm. Now, I recognize there's some discretion that gets used in there, but I thought the language harm or damage was appropriate, and I think it's a good discretionary tool, and it only allows the crossing arm to not be used on school grounds. If that's what the committee's good with, I'm fine telling them that. They can still say parking areas if they choose to, if that gets them to a place that they can agree. But I want to report back what this committee thinks. So you guys tell me, should we leave it the way it is, or should we change it to parking areas?
So Lieutenant Scott, I'm thinking about what you said. I'd still rather have kids, if they can only get 2 buses in and not 3, I'd rather have kids on a bus, sitting down in a nice, safe vehicle, as opposed to piling 3 buses in and having open those doors and kids coming up going everywhere. But I would like to hear.
It's not feasible in some cases.
Yeah, that's
But we have a double pickup line at many of our schools because it's a space issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and so they are doubling up in many cases.
That's school property.
School property.
So they would
Right.
be,
But in that case, also in their auditorium field trips, there are cases where we're stacking buses 340 on those side roads where we are directed as to do so, and they're directing traffic. But if we're bumper to bumper, and then we have all the students, in that case, that's one that comes to mind.
So
There are exceptions.
this is a clarifying question to Steve's example about, the large meets, or even like at Merrill. What are, apart from the crossing arm, what are other sort of safety practices that are in place to ensure that, to Rob's point, that students aren't just running around and that we're not creating more dangerous situations for them?
I believe that this one is on the parking brake. I mean, that's something that whenever we're parking at the school, it's going to be first and foremost on that brake before that door ever gets going.
And not just when we're parking, we're doing students loading and discharging. Yeah, regardless, when students are passing through the door, essentially, the parking brake should be set regardless if it's a student stop or you're at a venue of some sort waiting over.
That's essential because it really does, it prevents the rolling, it takes that extra moment for the driver to pause and look in the mirrors. That's that key factor. We'll be the pulling out of our emergency brake every time the bus is stopped.
Which is consistent with CDL.
Yes.
Right now, the way it's written. CDL manual obviously is not law, it's best practice in a lot of cases. Overlap there, but
So I like what I'm hearing. Just a thought, because I feel like the committee's close to coming together on this. Is trying not to deviate too far right now. We can get this passed, so we have some good solid language to work with, and then we make some good solid recommendations and also some rule changes if necessary. If this bill were to pass, it also makes it a violation for a driver to not follow a DOE rule. So if DOE adopts rules at the end of this, and the driver doesn't follow that rule, that would also be a traffic violation. And that's helpful for this commission to know that we've still got a lot of work to do. And my goal is to be able to go back maybe Tuesday, if they call this back, it's a work session, and give them our opinion on the language that's here and some slight tweaks. If we throw too much at them, I feel like we're going to be trying to come back here again to do this.
Right.
And not get them some type of consensus. So am I hearing parking areas does make sense, removing school property and just put parking areas? Does that cover, Mitzi, what you were talking about when you were stacking buses in different parking areas?
It broadly does. Yes.
Yeah.
There are always situations where
You
there's
talking
always an exception, but I believe that if we did remove that school portion, because any time the buses are in, and to your, so like that, safety feature. However, they're gonna get ripped off, they're not gonna have this property. Doesn't ultimately stop kids from popping over them, or that's how it's somewhere like that, or, and perhaps they have them going to the red buses to avoid that.
And, you know, I tell my drivers are in training all the time, is that, you know, at the end of the day, you get paid for good judgment, right? And so I think this allows those drivers to execute that good judgment in the sense of, you know, when to turn it on, turn it off, you know, that system. It gives them some boundaries as well. You can just say, you know, on the side of the road, you can just willy-nilly, you know, make the judgment turn this thing off, but allows them a little more. And I think gives them some, if they decide to turn it off, you know, gives them the ability to articulate the reason why they think it's rooted at all.
So I feel like the committee was going in the same direction as this group and removing school grounds and putting it as a parking area. I feel like that was their desire too. So if we can say we agree with that it's reasonable, it makes sense, I think they'll have no problem passing. Is that kind of where we're at? And I don't want to speak for everybody. I know what it's like to try to build consensus, and it's hard to get 13 members of the committee to agree on everything or anything at times, but I think they're close.
I'll read back my comment. I understand exactly where the arrow line. So I defer to the experts and do the day out.
I do as well. And I told the committee our concern was them not using it. Say they were in Fort Knox parking lot and there is pedestrian traffic to the left of the bus. It may not be your children, but this is a public location where there are other people there to visit. And you're going to have kids running in front of the bus, whether you plan on it or not. You should be using that crossing arm. That was kind of my message to them. But I am not a bus driver, and that is exactly why I said this commission needs to talk about these things before I can give you a solid answer. Because what makes sense to Bruce Scott, who's never driven a bus, may not make sense to one bus driver. If we just go with the parking area, I think it'll cover it. But keep in mind that language still says when the driver determines it would cause greater harm or damage not to. So in other words, we need to train and teach that this law passes that you shall use that crossing arm unless you have a reason not to. And that reason not to must be that it's going to create greater danger or harm by using it. And then they have that burden to meet if there is an issue, there's an accident, if bad things happen. They're going to have to articulate why they didn't use it. And it should not be because I didn't feel like it because I was going to park it. It should be because we had 3 buses in a small parking lot. There was absolutely no way to safely extend those. And so we made a decision that it's much safer with our staff, with our drivers, with our monitor to be able to control traffic way better than that crossing arm. And I think that'll leave that ability if we change it. So if everyone feels like at least that's a step in that direction, I'll make that recommendation.
I just have one question.
Yeah, well,
if you don't mind. Thinking about the circumstance and the location of Merrill Auditorium, I'm envisioning, are they actually in a parking area when they're discharging, or are they taking it to the street? Because that's a very narrow street.
It's a public roadway that they close down for the purposes of large events like that, school bus traffic. So there's somebody at each end of the street that's directing one-way traffic down the side road.
So technically it's not a park.
No,
I guess it's my point.
It is a public street.
The question that I have is parking area the appropriate word? You know, as far as location is concerned, or should there be just technically, if you make it an offense to with a specific area definition, and then they're doing that, so it's there. Technically, that would be a ticket offense, right?
yeah, so parking area is already defined in statute. And so that's why it was kind of an easier thing to select when they started talking about different locations. Parking area, at least we felt like we could define. Yes, if you, sure, he's got it right there. Let's make sure this fits.
Parking area designated for use as access or parking for patrons and customers of establishments. Parking area means an area designed for use as access or parking for patrons and customers of establishments used for public use.
So I was gonna say, like, as a layperson, could that be interpreted to say that when you shut down what is normally a road, and that essentially then is used for the express purposes of public coming and loading and unloading, does that then become, or could it be interpreted as a parking area, or would that need to be litigated at a later time?
Property temporarily. Finding two lawyers and no one to opinion.
Well, I think I'm kind of with that. This is, to me, just kind of sitting here, I agree with what we're trying to get to here. I think training to this is going to be complex, to be honest with you, with the drivers, right? I'm looking at this through the lens of the world I came from, right? Just before coming to this job here, I oversaw a schoolhouse, right, that trained mariners essentially to prevent collision. We used to go through things like this, right, to talk to exactly these types of things that the collision regulations talk about and dissect them, go through, exactly what course precedents and all that is set so that we understand it. So, but these guys are coming through every 2 years or so to get this stuff and go through scenarios. And this kind of goes to that same level, right? And so, like, I'm just trying to think about, like, trying to train drivers. Right now, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent here, we're devoid of a statewide training curriculum, right, for drivers. And so I certainly want to support this the best I can here, but I want to make sure this is something that, across the state, from Kittery to Fort Kent, right, and everywhere in between, that our directors, really, who are going to be the ones training people to this, are able to properly articulate this to what's needed. So I'm not trying to shoot it down. I just want to have a fully informed discussion across the board. But I see it as a training issue, to be honest with you, a difficulty, and maybe have some discussion. It doesn't have to be right here, but how we would, implement this piece.
Sure. So my thought from a practitioner is that when you shut down a roadway, it's no longer a public way, and we could very easily establish that as being an extension of a parking area. It's similar to when there's a parade and you see go-karts and four-wheelers and floats and all these things that would normally be illegal to be on a public way. As soon as you shut down the road, it's no longer a public way. They can do anything they want on it. Should we, are you thinking if I change or ask them to change the language to while on a public way, shall use it, and then it would kind of take away any other area that wasn't a public way, meaning any parking, any private lane. Public ways or parking areas is the language that's used often, like with a driver's license requirement, but we don't have to. We could, if this commission is thinking what they really want to make sure is that it's used on a public way at all times, and outside of that, use discretion, we can keep that same language that about greater harm or damage, because as soon as you close a roadway, it is not a public way. It's just like an area for construction. They put up a sign, they say construction, and that's why they can run their bucket loaders and excavators and skid steers on the road, because it's no longer a public way once it's closed.
What if if it said the crossing arm may be disabled only when the driver determines it caused greater harm or damage to use the crossing arm?
That's what I would say. You just get rid of the location that you're in altogether.
That was mentioned by the committee, and they did not love the idea of removing a language so that it could be discretionary. Because then they said, what about the incidents that happen? What could be, who's going to decide, other than a judge at the end of this, if it would cause greater harm or damage to have used it while on the public way? And they didn't want that debate. So they were really leaning towards this. We want it all the time, unless there's a really, really good reason not to. But the public way might be an answer, knowing we can regulate.
Buses go on onto private property, country clubs or whatever, to pick up students on a routine basis.
Right. But if the desire is to allow discretion when you're not on a public way, then that would work. So when you go into these country clubs, you wouldn't be required to use it, unless we could argue that there was greater harm or damage not doing so. So that's what I'm just wondering, if we said public way, well, on a public way, and then only allow them to be disabled when it's not on a public way, and that would include every area that I've heard so far talked about when you might need to disable them.
So then, for me, I feel like there should be something instead of removing the garbage or adding a front lot. There's never an exception for a student stop, because when you put the garbage in there, that it's determined by the driver that would cause greater cause of damage or harm or damage, then that's up to interpretation at any point in time. I feel like there needs to be something in there that says under these circumstances, yes, it's up to driver interpretation. Never to be during conducting a student stop. Because if that worries me, that, a driver could fall off the lead to think that it's safe to disable it, and they're loading and unloading students at the time for a standard stop. And and I know that gets kind of, whenever you have that verbiage of the driver determining, I think you have to kind of narrow it down, because to Chris's point, when we're training drivers, somebody's point of view is going to be different from the next driver.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I really think we need to make sure that while on a public way, they have to use it. There's no discretion on a public way. The discretion comes when you're not on a public way, which would be parking areas, would be the roads that are shut down for a limited period of time. That's no longer a public way. That's the only way legally, from a practitioner and enforcement point of view, that I can come up with, that would always require it on the roadway while you're doing your stops, and still allow an exemption for every area that has it talked about. And I know that the committee's probably not going to be good in just using discretion. Like that makes sense, that you can't put it all on a driver. So does this group feel better if the language said, while on a public way, you shall, like we already have?
Can I clarify?
Yeah,
Sure. Do you currently pick up or drop off on private roads?
Yes.
Because I know we do.
District to district, yeah.
So you'd still be required to use it on a private way unless it would create greater harm or danger. So your drivers will be trained and told that they shall. You shall use it unless you can't. If there's a reason you can't. But I think statutorily that we could enforce it from a law enforcement perspective. If it was on a private way and they didn't use the crossing arm and there was no reason not to, we would say, what would be the greater harm or danger in using your crossing? Well, I just didn't want to use it because I'm on a private way, but that's not what the law says. The law says you shall, unless you can articulate that it would have created harm or damage. Where's your harm or damage on the private way with nothing in front of you that you might strike with it? You'd still be required to use it.
The term way, Scott, applies vehicles that are moving, right?
They don't have to be moving, just the public way is already defined in statute too, and it's the area that's
The boundary lines of the highway as opposed to parking lots.
yes. Yeah, and that's a good point, because it does include some private ways. If the private way is open for the public, there's reasonably could be anticipated that they're there, and that while it's a private way, the laws would still apply. Like driver's licenses on a private way, you don't need one unless it's a through street and you're driving from one end to the other. If you're using it to commute through, then you would have to have a license. And it gets very technical with public and private ways and easements and things. But I
guess for the practitioners in the room, of which I call it Scott's category, the intent of the crossing arm prevent what?
It keeps the students out a certain distance from the hood so you can see them, because
It's to protect the pedestrian from the bus itself.
it's a, well, certainly to primarily, but to get the students to walk out in front of the bus so you can have visibility, so that you can protect them, so that they don't get too, as kids get off, right? Especially little kids, for some reason, the bus like a magnet, they drag their shoulder along, for whatever reason, they love doing that. They love being close to the bus. So it's to get them to go out, and we teach them to take a few steps out in front of the bus, and this is a visual.
It doesn't protect it from traffic.
No,
It's a visual reference.
Yeah, it's a
safety. It's a situational awareness tool for the driver.
It's a herding tool. It's what it herds them to the right spot. Yeah.
And you have a high school student that will purposely walk around it. And to avoid looking up and making eye contact.
Or push it in and
Yeah.
walking close by the bus.
It's like at the BMB when you have a little stretchy rope thing, so they walk a certain way. The exact same thing. But for students, so they go to a certain location. Yeah, and I guess that's exactly it. Is that like the law? I again, oppose what we're trying to do here. I think that's the intent is to like say, hey, when it makes sense to disable it, right? Because you're gonna hit something with it. There should be very limited reasons when we ever have to disable this thing. Because even at schools, when you're getting close to it, or when you're stacked up on each other, I mean, I know some schools are tighter than others, but there's generally some room to put these things out.
Well, it's mostly for me is when loading at night because we stagger our buses and we load, both sides. And then once the buses are all loaded, they pull away. Well, you need room to walk across to the other bus.
Yeah.
The scenarios I guess that you all are describing are moments when you physically couldn't extend the arm.
Right.
Because there's an obstacle in the way, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, the ultimate safety solution is if you're onboarding or offloading students and that thing can physically be, there is room to extend it. And you get rid of the where am I, your point about training and clarity, you get rid of the what am I doing? That all we're saying is that hey, we relieve you of the requirement to extend it. You physically don't have room to extend it. But if you have small humans getting off and on, that to me would be the cleanest outcome. So if you're in Merrill and there's 20 feet between buses and you can extend it, extend it. If you're in a parking lot, you have space to extend it, extend it. If you're on a roadway, you have space to extend it, extend it. But if there's no room to physically,
does that make sense to me?
It does. I think you can say that you should use it in all practical, when it's practical, right? But when it's come up with the exact language, but like you should be using it, right? But in the few instances when you don't have the ability to extend it, to extenuating circumstances, whatever we want to call it, right?
insufficient space.
Insufficient space, yeah. Yeah, and all of them should be used, by the driver to have that space. But when it's not possible, right? The use could be.
So, just for clarification, are we saying while on school property, or you're talking anytime if there's a physical barrier that doesn't allow it?
I feel like it would have to be any time in any situation. I think it should be at all times unless there is a physical obstruction that prevents us from using it.
I like that. What I worry about is that if a driver decides to create that physical distance and says, well, I couldn't use it because you should have stopped back further. I mean, we want them to use it and not say, well, I was too close to the door or the wall or then back up 5 feet, 6 feet, don't stop there. That's the problem we run into with this. But if I feel like we're building consensus with proximity, let's do that. Let's go back to them and say that it should be used at all times unless there's a physical barrier that restricts it. If everyone agrees with that, I'm more than happy to pitch that.
You couldn't say something to the extent of drivers should make all attempts to provide enough space for use of the device or stuff like that. And then, but if space or conditions don't allow something to that extent, right, that the system would be with caution, disabled.
Yeah, but I also think what I heard was it shall be used in all cases where there's a standard student stop while loading and unloading of students, period. In other instances, then that's when the physical barrier could be in the case. But I think being able to separate and say, anytime there's a standard stop, you have to deploy it, period. We're not saying you get an exception.
Because as a director, those stops are established in a safe manner.
Yeah.
So we've already determined that. So there shouldn't be those obstructions in most cases at any given time. So it should always be able to be safely used during student stop.
Are there other traffic regulations that talk to like prudency or good judgment or anything like that that's expected of an operator, whether it's commercial or a Class C license, not commercial type license or anything like that you think of? That would cover, that cover the gap, so to speak here? No, okay,
Not that I can think of.
okay. So I was gonna say, if there was that, that could be a reference back, in accordance with whatever.
So how about we do this? Read the sentence with me. The red signal lights, stop arm and crossing arm must be activated and in use while receiving and discharging passengers. The crossing arm may only be disabled when physical space is limited. And then I can use Melanie Furman, the legal analyst, to craft that language to what she feels is going to be best supported in OPA. Does that make sense? If the only exception, and we don't say on school property, we don't say parking areas, we just say when physical space restricts the use of it, or something to that effect with that. I've seen a lot of, I think so.
Physical space or objectives.
Physical space.
Because physical space, again, leaves it up to interpretation for a driver to determine whether or not.
Well, I was gonna say, maybe just a couple words saying like, despite attempts by the operator to leave space or something like that.
So when physical space or an obstruction prevents doing so, I will tell you the only technical issue with saying obstruction is the obstruction can be that it's frozen, that it's dirty, that it's not working because there's sand stuck in that thing. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But if we're good with that, I can at least pitch that and have something to ask, because I think this is the same conversation the committee's having and trying to figure out how do you get this language perfect. And one of the members yesterday got it right, that if we wait for perfection, we're never going to do this.
Right.
Let's get it close. And so I think we're really in a good place and close if we do that.
Yeah, probably it says something like all attempts by the operator should be made to use the arm, and then something like that. That way, it kind of puts it on the driver, that judgment piece a little bit. It's a good judgment piece.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that you could reasonably look at somebody and say, did you make all attempts to use that? Right. Like stop short enough. Did you park your bus in a manner where you knew you were going to deploy it and was going to hit something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The problem with not using it and disabling it is remembering to enable it before you
Yep.
go to that. So I think it would be as little times as, ever to be disabled.
Yeah, we agree. Do we feel like we got consensus at this point? And I hate to do this, but I want to take a vote. I want to be able to tell them that we voted and that we're good with it. So do we have a motion that, let's just say, to accept the amended language that I just provided? And I will make sure that when we're done writing it with me and Melanie Furman, that I share it with the group. If I can have like a motion to accept the amount, okay?
Second.
Any more conversation?
Just one question. When you use the example of obstruction being solved or something on a sensor, you run that by the individual as well to discuss or even add a caveat that says like an external, like unrelated to the actual bus itself, obstruction. So it has nothing to do with the bus. That would be a whole different matter if you have a faulty that would need to go back to. That'd be my only question. If I hadn't thought about those sorts of obstructions on solved.
Okay, so how about we say the physical space restriction and just take obstruction out of it.
To address Chris's question a minute ago, and maybe Scott to help you prepare to take on the more absolute black and white ideas. So if you believe Chad, you have language in 29A that says drivers must operate at a careful and prudent speed not greater than is reasonable and proper. That's how our law works. Then it determines whether somebody was high speed when they operating on safely reasonable conditions, etc. So there is room, there are precedents to have that kind of flat language.
So that language would be under 2054, in my opinion, and then 2054 is for the operation of emergency vehicles. That driving with due regard for safety at all times. I don't think it says it anywhere else, though. It'd be under 2054 that would have that language. And that's where it says you must drive for the due regard for safety at all times, and that's under emergency privileges under 24. And so I don't think it would cover school bus operation.
No, but I think Chris's point was.
Try to come up with some language.
Law, leave room for judgment. I think there
I see what you're saying.
in there that would fall into the committee's purview that already account for those situations. And so then the question is, well, how do you enforce it? And that's when your comments were given about judgment.
Yep.
How the enforcement role is how you determine.
Yep, I like it.
Yeah.
So that can be something in our final report back as we add language to 29A, similar to 2054, section 7.
It does actually, yeah. And I think that's the possibility of additional language, for that. Yeah.
So we had a first, a second, we had conversation. So the first, just for clarification, was that we agree to move forward with the language that's here with the changes that we discussed. And then I'll share it back with the group. First, second, any more conversation? And so show of hands, those in favor of us reporting that back. Okay, thank you. I know that took a little longer than I thought, but it's not easy to come to consensus. I believe we must do that.
So I'm going to make a recommendation related to our agenda, where we had intended at about 9:20 to have a discussion about 29A and some of the recommendations for any potential changes, and then begin having conversations with Andrew Weissman, Brian Cressy, and Matt Kearns, starting around 9:45. I would recommend that we hold on the 29A discussion and perhaps do that as some of our homework. I'm just trying to make sure that we have adequate time to hear from the folks that we've invited to talk to us about specifications.
I agree. I think we hit 29A really well, other than what we did a licensing, and I think we can have direct hiring and add some other time when we have a little space.
Yeah. I had some conference I did want to have on 29A about the actual doors, and I think maybe after we had the presentation, so
Okay.
we could maybe just have a short discussion about it.
Yep, that can be folded in. We did it theoretically allowed time for discussion. So, all right. So at this point, I know we have Andrew Weissman is in the room, and Brian Cressy. I believe Matt Kearns is here as well. Yep. So I'm going to invite Andrew Weissman to jump in. The purpose of this part is to sort of learn more about retrofitting and some of the technology and some of the considerations we need to keep in mind when considering any kind of retrofitting, whether it's crossing arms as well as anti-pinch technology. So I'm going to invite Andrew to join us in the conversation.
Hello, commission team. Thank you for having us and letting us speak. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, can you enable screen sharing, please? But just to give a quick introduction while that gets set up, I know we're a little short on time. So just to introduce myself, I'm Andrew, and I'm also in the same room as my colleagues Nick and Lance. But I work for Miser, and Miser is a manufacturer for pinch sensors. And we've essentially been doing pinch sensors in the automotive, the public transport, and the industrial industries for about 40 years now. So we have a long history of manufacturing.
Andrew, we're gonna interrupt you just for a second. I'm sorry. Your sound is only coming through my computer, and so we're trying to get sound to come into the room. So hang on one second.
No worries.
All right, Andrew, let's try that again.
Does it sound better now?
No.
And just so you know, from our side, it's a little difficult to hear everyone on the other side of the table because it's coming from your computer as well.
Yeah, I think what we're running into is that we're dealing with, we thought we were on the microphones in the room, and that's obviously not happening. So let me work with our audio settings.
I'm gonna try to remove it. Try to slip it.
Okay.
Try my microphone at least. Just because I feel a little louder.
Andrew, try it now.
How does it sound now?
Well, it's louder on my computer, but still hasn't gone to the array here in the room.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, Andrew, give it a try now. Let's just see if it's any louder.
Can you guys hear me now?
Is that any better or no? Why don't you try it, and I'm gonna go try to find an external speaker.
Okay.
It's kicker.
Sorry, everyone. All right, Andrew, why don't we go ahead and take 4?
Okay, do you want me to begin, or are we gonna wait for the external speaker?
No, if you can go ahead and begin. I want to make sure that we have time to hear you, and I think most folks around the table are able to hear. We're just going to have to listen and hope the drilling in the room next to us doesn't happen again. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. So as I was mentioning, Miser has been doing pinch sensors for the last 40 years in all types of climates across the world. We have technology that's currently being used in Canada, Finland, Norway, very similar climates to the type that you guys experience in Maine. So we do have the experience of dealing with, issues with the snow and the salt, and it's quite frankly not an issue for the pinch sensor as well, if that's a concern that some people may have. But passenger trains and transit buses worldwide are equipped with obstruction detection. Pretty much all types of vehicles are mostly equipped with this besides school buses. And quite frankly, I feel like it's a necessity to also begin implementing on school buses as well, because you're transporting smaller kids and they have big backpacks on, big winter coats, and obstruction detection can help prevent the worst disasters essentially. And kind of what Miser's specialty is providing anti-drag solutions, which is an improved version of pinch protection, which can detect objects as small as a backpack strap or a dog leash. But the reason why we're here is obviously the recent incident that happened in December when a 5-year-old Simon Gonzalez was dragged by a vehicle over 300 feet before he was free from the door, and unfortunately ran over, and he did not survive his injuries. And it was a very unfortunate incident. And what makes it even more unfortunate was this school district used all Bluebird buses, and for the original 2025 Maine regulation, Miser had partnered with Bluebird, and we provided some pinch sensors to this school district. They had, I believe, 3 or 4 vehicles from 2025 that were equipped with our pinch sensors. And if that technology was equipped on this school bus, it would have saved Simon's life. But this is not the first incident that's happened. This is just 2 more examples. The one on the left was also in Maine in 2022, which is what caused the original 2025 regulation to go into effect last year, where a child was dragged about 600 feet, but they survived, suffered some road rash, but now they're not really comfortable riding school buses, and the parents have to find a different mode of transportation. And the incident on the right is kind of the most famous incident because it was caught on video. I didn't equip the video here, but basically she is stuck by her backpack strap outside of the door for about 50 seconds being dragged. And the only reason the bus driver noticed was because a car came up from behind the bus, got in front of it and slammed on the brakes. And the driver then noticed that she was dragging this child who had to undergo several surgeries. And she now, is anxious every time she sees or hears a school bus. But, it's not just a Maine thing. It happens across North America. 10 years ago, a girl passed away in Massachusetts. That was the last fatality. But there's also been incidences in Utah, North Carolina, Indiana, Canada, even Georgia and Alabama. And then the bottom left one on this screen was another one in Maine in 2022. So there's been 3 separate incidences in the last 4 years in Maine. So I believe it's kind of time to, have a solution apply that applies to all the vehicles. So no more kids can be injured by something that is preventable. But to kind of explain what we're proposing is the test specimen is really what we want to talk about. We think this next regulation regarding anti-fin should have some type of test specimen on it. And that's very common in transit bus specifications. To be able to comply to a regulation, you have to detect a certain object. And as an example, the state of California has one for their transit buses for obstruction detection. And it states the door shall release when closed on an object as small as a 1/2 inch diameter smooth cylinder held perpendicular to the plane of the door, opening at any point where the door has meat. And this video on the right is an example that we've done on the IC bus door. It's a small, we call them water jet samples that we do at the beginning of a project. But this is with a 4 millimeter test specimen, which is about 0.15 of an inch, so well below the California code. But as you can see, the green light is on, so that indicates that it's detecting this test specimen. And Miser is recommending that the state of Maine adopts a similar door obstruction regulation. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's just a recommendation from our side. And this will ensure that your students are as safe as possible when onboarding and exiting the vehicle, and they don't have to be worried about being stuck in the door and potentially dragged. And the original Maine regulation did not include a test specimen. So some of the solutions that were provided by the OEM for the 2025 vehicles aren't real pinch protection solutions. They're more door jar signals or something along those lines. So obviously we want to keep the kids safe, and something like this will keep them safer than how the original regulation was written. But just to kind of inform you guys on how they work, basically is the door controller reads a constant resistance being sent from the sensors. And once the sensor is actuated, the resistance drops below a certain threshold that's indicated to the controller what that threshold is. And then if it drops below that point, it tells the controller to open the door or do an audible alarm, depending on how the system is wired, essentially. But if a sensor was to be damaged, which is not very common, resistance would increase to infinitely and notify the vehicle immediately. So if you have a damaged sensor, it's not going to just continue to be on there and you won't know it's broken. You'll know right away if there is an issue with the sensor. And the sensors also remain on after the door closes to ensure maximum protection, because things like backpack straps are not going to be detected when they're closed, but it's going to be detected when the child is trying to free themselves and tug. So that's why the sensors remain on after the fact. And something like this can be programmed how long you want the doors to stay on, the sensors to stay on after the doors close, or maybe once you reach a certain speed, then those sensors shut off. It can be wired in a lot of different ways. And the sensor can be programmed to have an audible alarm, like I mentioned, reopen the doors, a visual alert, or even a message to the driver dashboard. But we've talked with some people correlating to this retrofit potentially, and it seems like we're probably going to go down the route of having the sensors hooked up to an audible alarm, and it'll depower the doors. That was probably the solution that would be supplied for these older vehicles. But here's a couple more videos. This video on the left is myself at Bluebird doing a test with a 1/2 inch rod, which was that California code that I mentioned earlier. And as you can see, there's going to be a red light that goes off above the door. which indicates that it detected it and it opens the door back up. And then on the left is one of our colleagues in Germany testing a transit door system with his finger, and it can detect his finger as well, which is about the same size as a 1/2-inch rod. And then this is a little more informational, but what is anti-drag, which I did mention earlier. It's an improved version of obstruction detection, and basically it's mandatory in Europe right now, and it's slowly making its way to the United States. The anti-drag regulation is EN 14752, and it's more and more, especially on the rail side, but also on the bus side, they've been requesting anti-drag detection on their doors to ensure that they're able to detect all the obstructions. And basically what that test would be is this test specimen in the top right. It's like a rubber, a black rubber with a knob on the end of it. It's inserted into a closed door, and it has to be pulled in 7 different directions, 3 to the front of the bus, 3 to the back of the bus, and 1 straight out. And it has to be able to detect that test specimen at every location to be determined as anti-drag. And when we make our designs for school buses, for transit buses, for any type of public transportation vehicle, we always make it our goal to make sure that we comply to this regulation as well. But here's kind of an example of how the drag detection works. So this is a lanyard in an IC bus door. As you can see, the green light's not on, so it's not actuated right now. But when my colleague starts pulling on it, you can see that the green light activates, which means the sensors are on, and it's a relatively low force that requires these sensors to be actuated. So currently, right now, we're developing solutions with all 3 of the big school bus manufacturers. As I mentioned before, Miser has partnered with Bluebird, and we provided our solution in 2025, and we have gained about 6 months of field experience with Bluebird, and I'm not too sure how many buses, but I'm guessing about 50 to 100 buses that are currently using our technology in Maine on Bluebird buses. And we've already begun working with the engineering team to develop a solution for potential older vehicles, because a control unit might have to be supplied for a lot of these vehicles, which we also manufacture at Miser to process the signal essentially. And then we've also been in contact with the IC Bus and Thomas Built Bus dealers, who will be speaking after me. And we're working on preliminary design right now on both the door seal and the control unit. But Miser is planning on working very closely with the dealers and the installers to help as much as possible to develop a proper wiring solution / design to make installation as easy as possible, because I know this is a new technology for school buses, so there's going to be a lot of questions, and we're going to have my team here in the US, we're going to have our expert in Germany come in and help as much as possible to give our recommendations on how to install this, how to wire it, and answer any questions that may come up. But Miser's designs are specific per school bus OEM, and no other school bus designs are being worked on right now. So as Microverter Collins Bus is an example. So we don't have a solution for them right now. Obviously, they would have to reach out if they need one. And going on to the next step. For the timeline, I know you guys were talking about the crossing arms. Beginning of the year is kind of maybe the time frame for that. For the pinch sensors, Miser thinks it'll be best for everyone involved if this gets implemented at the beginning of the 27-28 school year. This should get everyone the essential amount of time to develop the proper solutions and designs without compromising school buses in the field and having to shut them down because they don't have the proper anti-pinch solutions on yet. I think, about 1.5 years will give us plenty of time to get solutions out there. And just as a reference, Miser can begin manufacturing parts in roughly the following time frames. Bluebird, since we're already partnered with them, we can start manufacturing parts in the second half of the year. And then for IC Bus and Thomas Built buses, we'll be looking at potentially the end of the year, but more likely the beginning of 2027, where we can start supplying these pinch sensors. But just some questions and some next steps for us. But First one, I think something that is correlating that hasn't been talked about, is manual doors going to be included in this regulation, or will they be omitted? Most vehicles are automatic doors, but manual doors, I feel like that has to be something that needs to be addressed as well if they're omitted from this, or if they also need pinch detection solutions. Miser is also willing to show a live demo on a Bluebird bus. If you guys want to see it actually on a school bus, we would need to get in contact with someone in the area to be able to provide a bus for us for a day with the technology. But if you guys would like something like that, I can get in contact with the right people and try and get a demo for you guys potentially as soon as possible. And then what can Miser do to support further? And if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. But that's the summary of the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate you being here and being willing to provide us some information on the current technology. And we've got some questions primarily as it pertains to the reliability of the systems, and more importantly, if we were to require this retro fitting, what concerns do you think this committee should be talking about by way of availability of parts and components, availability of those to installations, and a realistic time frame? I know you said Q4 of 26 or through Q2 of 27, but that sounded like a production time to come up with the components. And so we would be more interested in how long it would take if the commission was in favor of adding this requirement. Realistically, how long would it take to be able to install these on 400 buses, say?
So I know something that was mentioned when I was talking with the bus dealers in the past, and they'll be speaking after, so maybe they can give their input. But it was mentioned, once a good solution is developed, which Miser will be heavily a part of, they might offer a workshop for the school district mechanics to be able to install the material or the product themselves. So that'll obviously save a lot of time for the bus dealer, because I feel like that they're going to have it's going to be hardest for them, because they're going to be a little bottlenecked with, if they have to retrofit all the crossing arms and they have to retrofit pinch sensors with that, they're obviously going to have a lot of work in front of them. So it might be easier to, dish some of it off to the school district mechanics if that's available, and have them install the solution themselves. But we're estimating, and we don't know this for sure yet, but I think installing the actual door seals is easy. That only takes a few minutes. The hard part is the wire routing, which is what we're going to start experimenting with very soon. We should have some very early iterations of samples for both of the bus dealers in the near future, where we can kind of get a ballpark of what we think the best wiring solution is. But it's probably going to take about an hour or two per vehicle, probably closer to 2 hours per vehicle to get these installed. And besides that, I don't know how much in terms of the exact timeline. I think it'd be hard for us to give a solution. That was Miser's timeline for when we can start producing parts, and then I'm not sure how long it'll take for the bus dealers or the school districts to actually install them.
So currently, there is not a solution. There's not the hardware and software to be able to retrofit school buses, but there is the current technology to put them in new buses. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
So for Bluebird, we have a solution in the field. It's been in the field since last year, and that solution is done, and it can be ready to go. And like I said, 4 or 5 months, just because of the large quantity and things like that. But we like to take our time and to ensure that the solution is working perfectly. So we start off with, we call them, like I mentioned earlier, water jet samples. They're about a foot big, and we use it to make sure that, it passes those regulations that I mentioned in the presentation, without having to incur unnecessary tooling costs in case we have to make slight changes. So we already have the CAD of the vehicles. We've already made a design, and we're currently making that initial water jet sample. And we should have that probably by the end of the month, maybe beginning of April. And we'll send that to the bus dealers. potentially come to Maine and help them with their questions and their installation. And then from there, once the bus dealers think it looks good and it's working properly, then we'll begin probably about 2 to 3 months before we get a first sample from our rubber extrusion supplier, and we'll verify those in the same process with the bus dealers. And if everything looks good, then we can get serial production parts. So it's a lot of lead time from the rubber supplier, which for the first sample I mentioned was approximately 3 months. And then the parts after that, once they get approved, it's another 1 to 2 months to get parts here, and then we can begin manufacturing. But we do have the solutions. They're not approved yet, but we have the designs.
So does Mazer offer installation, or does Mazer just sell the solution, the product itself?
We don't do installation right now. We've kind of considered maybe hiring like a temporary worker to help with installation, but at this time we don't actually do the installation, but we're obviously willing to help them make it as easy and as efficient as possible to install it on the vehicles.
Thank you for that. I do have a few other questions, but I want to pause and see if any other members of the commission have questions before I hog all your time.
Yeah,
Chris.
Yeah, Chris Prosciutto. Sorry. Thank you for presenting, first of all. I guess my question is, I'm still a little unclear on like the retrofit possibility, and is that something that you believe is possible? And I bet it's been something that I missed in there. There's a lot of information, and it's such a new technology. But do you believe that this is a technology that could be retrofitted to most buses?
Yes, I definitely think so, because Miser provides all the necessary components of both the pinch sensor, the rubber door seal, and also the control units. And kind of where we're in the dark right now is how many of these vehicles will need control units. But like I said, we offer it, and basically kind of how the system would work would be the wire would go from the door seal where the pinch sensor is. It would go into the compartment above the door where our control unit can be stored, and it can be wired into the control unit. And then that control unit would have to be routed to whatever controls the doors to indicate, when the signal is received that there's an obstruction. Then that signal from the control unit has to go to the body controller to tell it to open the doors, or have an audible alarm go off, for example. So we provide all the components to do the retrofit. The only thing we don't do is the installation.
Okay. And is this compatible with both air and electric style doors?
Yes, I believe the big difference would be electric doors would not need the control unit, while the air doors will probably need the control unit. Not all the air doors, but a good portion of them, especially if they're, over 4 or 5 years old.
Okay. And I know you're kind of in the beginning of this, so if you can't answer it, that's fine. Do you know approximately how long it takes to install a system like this?
It's difficult. I can definitely ask our contact at Bluebird, because they are being manufactured there in a similar type of design. So I can ask if he's able to provide, what's his production time for installation. But I'm guessing it's probably I would say 2 hours to be safe.
Okay, thank you. I realized you had mentioned that before. I'm just sorry.
No problem.
Thank you.
Andrew, just a clarifying question. This is Megan. You had been talking about sort of where Miser is currently in terms of the solution that you've identified, that is that you have the design for, but it hasn't been approved yet, but you feel like it's in the works. That is for the Bluebird buses, correct? But it does not apply yet to IC or to the Thomas buses, correct?
No, the Bluebird designs are approved. They're already in the field, so they're approved and they're good to go. We're working on some small iteration changes, but the difficult part has already been completed essentially. So those are good to go. We're just kind of waiting for more information before proceeding, which is why the deadline or the timeline I put was for Q3 and Q4 of this year for Bluebird. The IC bus and Thomas built buses we have the designs for, but they haven't been approved yet for the first sample. And actually, back in 2018, our team did preliminary testing with both of those companies. We've done the original design beforehand. However, we enhanced it slightly since 2018. We've had new sensors come out that are more sensitive. So we have replaced the older sensor with the new sensor that's more sensitive. And from there, we're going to have these new samples tried out with the bus dealers. And if they're approved, we'll go forward. But the original designs back in 2018 worked as anticipated as well.
Andrew, it's Chris Ireland from BMV. Is there any federal regulation that governs this kind of a system above and beyond any state's regulations? And have you seen any states go and pursue federal grant money for these kind of installations?
So it's not federally mandated for buses. For trains, it's mandated they have to have some type of obstruction detection. But Maine is the first state to kind of approach the sensitive edge topic for school buses. So there's not really a baseline, which is why I referenced the California regulation for transit buses of the 1/2-inch bar. And you know, you can even modify that if you want it to be a little more easy to comply per chance, then you can go with like a 1-inch rod per se. But there's nothing right now that's federally mandating this on school buses, definitely. And there's some states just have obstruction detection on for their transit buses. It's the closest correlation. I'm not sure if that answered your question entirely.
So nothing mandating it, but nothing governing what you produce either, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anybody else, so let's ask the question about the elephant in the room. What's the cost? What's the rough costs per bus? And
we're estimating for the pinch sensors, it's going to be about $550, and then if a control unit is required, it's going to be about an additional $225. And those are approximations, but Miser is going to be fronting the cost for the tooling, for example, for those new designs for IC bus and Thomas built buses. So obviously we're going to have those costs from our side, but we won't, pass that on to the Maine directly. But that's the estimated cost for per bus.
So what you're saying, right, is approximately $750 per bus, and that would cover the sensor and a control unit, but it wouldn't obviously include labor. It wouldn't include probably the rest of the wiring on buses that it doesn't exist on.
Correct.
So what wiring harnesses, relays, things of that nature would not be included.
Well, the relay is the control unit, and so the only thing that's not accounted for is the labor to install the profile.
Okay.
So plus labor. So this would come as a kit for a specific type of bus. It wouldn't be additional like wires and things like that would need to be run and procured to install the said kit.
No, it's we would have to know the year and the brand of the bus, because for example, IC buses changed their door design as of 2025. So we're going to have a design for 2024 and below and a design for 2025, for example. So we'll have to know those two factors, and then we'll provide you with the finished door seal that just slides right onto the aluminum rail of the door blade, and then the control unit that's associated with it.
I got one last question. What advice can you provide this commission regarding the retrofitting of school buses compared to just purchasing them new point forward with the safety equipment, the anti-pinch sensors built into it, so to speak, rather than the retrofitting? Like, just compare and contrast what we're going to see for a difference by way of, let's say, warranty, by way of product reliability, and things of that nature.
Can you ask that question again, please?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, like, the warranty period. When you purchase a bus, you got one warranty. If you retrofit it, do we have a different warranty? And so is there a warranty? What does it cover? And what would your advice be to this commission on point forward as in new equipment, you purchase a new bus with it, contrasting to retrofitting? Would there be a difference in the quality and the reliability of an aftermarket system?
I don't see too much of a concern personally, but we have a warranty. I'll have to, I don't want to speak for my quality team, but I'll have to run it by them and talk about what kind of warranty we can provide. But our standard one, I believe, is 6 months after installation. I'm not too sure what it is off the top of my head because, quite frankly, we don't have too many warranty claims. I think I've had 1 or 2 in my 3 years working at the company. So that's a low problem from my point of view, but we will need to, in the process of installing it working with the bus dealers, we're going to have to, evaluate the system and see how comfortable we are with how much of a warranty we can provide. But obviously the main reason that this is even a conversation is because the original regulation was for, newer buses, newer technology, and it didn't work as intended because there was another incident on an older bus. So now we have a new issue that needs to be addressed. And I've talked to the family of the child that passed away, and their number one goal is to have all these vehicles equipped with anti-pinch technologies. And I've even had the grandpa of the child that passed away say that he'll install himself. That's how serious he is. And the original regulation didn't capture as much as it could, and the solutions are out there. And I personally do not see too much of a cause for concern with not being able to provide a solution that'll work on these buses.
Okay. I think that answers all of our questions for now, Andrew. And we certainly appreciate you being here. And I know that you said you'd be available if we had more questions. So thank you for your time. If anything else comes up, we'll reach back out to you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for letting me speak today and setting this up.
Okay. Have a great day, Andrew.
You too.
Yep. Matt and Brian Cressy are also here. Hi, Brian. We're still playing with the sound in here. But we have you on here at this point. And is Matt Kearns also on?
I'm here.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. We wanted to invite you also to share sort of your experience and information that you have related to retrofitting school bus technology, including anti-pinch technology, and also considerations for crossing arms as well, but focusing primarily on the anti-pinch technology. So Brian, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yeah.
All right, great. I don't have a presentation. I do have the list of questions that Lieutenant Scott had emailed. And I think probably what I'd like to do is just to deal with the crossing gates first, because I think that's a pretty simple solution. Those are readily available. We put them in all the time, and we have an awful lot of them on the road in Maine already. So like I said, there's solutions for each vendor, for each model bus, for air and electric. And again, that's a national thing. That's, really we can check that off. It's just a question of do you want to do it, and do you want to pay for it? So again, I think that's a pretty easy discussion. The anti-pinch becomes a little bit more complicated. And as Andrew touched on, we're the first ones in the country to talk about this. My big advice to the committee is that we really want to stress what we want to have on the vehicles in terms of a function and an outcome, and not necessarily equipment. That's a common thing with school bus rules, but we want to be very specific. Do we want anti-pinch function? Do we want anti-drag technology? Do we need audible alarms? Do we not need audible alarms? Because if we don't do that, we create issues, sort of like what Andrew brought up with the manual door. It's our interpretation that you don't need an anti-pinch sensor with a manual door at the moment, because the driver is providing the actuation of that door function. I don't believe that's currently in the rules right now. So we need to be specific what we want to require on the vehicles for function. He also, we just brought up the issue about the OEM versus the retrofit piece. And I think Matt would also agree with me. Everything done OEM when the vehicle is built is easier, cheaper, better warranty, and functions better both in the short and the long term. That's true with air conditioning, with all equipment on the bus. And I don't think crossing gates or anti-pinching or reversing doors are any different. So you get more bang for your buck and better function both in the short and long term on that. With regard to the retrofitting, that's really the big meat of this discussion. There are solutions to do this. None of them are quick and none of them are cheap. And my overarching concern with the retrofitting discussion is we need a realistic timeline on that. It may not be politically what wants to be said, but we also need to weigh that on, the possibility that buses aren't done in time. Everyone likes to say it's great, we can do them in the summer, but Chris, Mitzi, Wayne, you all have technicians. They're driving. They have to take vacation at certain points. Summer's just as busy as the rest of the year, and there's really no. We've been a school bus dealer for 50 years. There's actually no good time ever to work on a school bus because of vacations, summers, or school years. So let's just be really realistic on the retrofitting. Can they be safely and effective and reliably retrofitted? Yes. It will take a long time. It will cost a lot of money, and we just need to set some really reasonable expectations towards that, and be very clear in what we want. Looking down the rest of that list, there's a question on there about a service door interlock and applying a parking brake. That can be done. I don't think it's the intent that really should happen. We don't like to immobilize school buses in the road and create secondary issues. So the technology exists. We use it on wheelchair lifts. If that's something of interest, we should be very specific on that, and we can assess that. Retrofitting we touched on the retrofitting versus the OEM, and maybe in terms of the other safety equipment, I might let Matt speak first and field any questions, and then we can get into that because that's a different discussion as well.
Thank you, Brian. So I know you said that it would take a long time and a lot of money to do retrofitting. I don't want to put you on the spot and try to get an exact number, but I recognize that installation is often far more expensive than the parts and components themselves. The 1 to 2 hour per vehicle, that was an estimate that was provided from Andrew. Let's just say from experience that we can count on double that. So 4 hours or 5 hours per bus. First of all, what would a rough estimate of cost be for the labor to provide that service? And I think you have to also recognize that it would be probably done at the district rather than at your facility, because bringing every bus to you would be a challenge, and having a crew that went from district to district would be more realistic. Do you just have a rough idea of what that might look like for costs, and how long do you think it would take with the current industry to be able to, say, retrofit, first of all, the 1,500 buses for crossing arms, which I think is an easier one, and then 2,400 buses roughly that we're talking about for the anti-pinch sensors. And again, I'm not trying to lock you into a price. I just want to have a rough idea of what we're talking about. If you had 4 hours labor per bus, we can do the math after that. But just one bus, what do you think it would cost to install anti-pinch sensors and then the crossing arm?
Yeah, so our shop rate currently is 170 an hour. So, you could be 340, give or take. Um, Obviously when someone does the same thing over and over, they get better and better at it. You get better quality work and you get it done in a more reasonable time. Um, Andrew gave you those concepts on the costs on the equipment too.
Yep.
So that's a real rough number. Again, looking at the timeline on that, that's the big thing. So would we have to staff up for that? Of course, we'd want to, move road techs from other states in. When we had an end line that we needed to do. Um, the OEM Thomas existing air door auto reversing setup that is in the brand new buses. We figured right around $4,000 a bus. And those parts exist today. That solution exists today, and we can order the parts. That's a couple hours included in that too. So you've got a range maybe on the low end of what, $2,500 up to 4,000. And then you've also we're gonna have carve outs for type A and type Ds, because those are very different door setups. And that's really the economics of the situation. The timeline, again, that's tough. You're gonna have to staff up and know where the goal line is to get to. So crossing gates, that's a pretty simple discussion. Somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a bus. We can do, a few of those in a day. People know how to do them. They have parts and hardware and training for that already. And there's going to be a variety of situations. I can see certain school districts with certain technicians that wanted to do all their own work and do it when they felt like doing it, and had the bus in for an A service anyway, and that's totally fine. And I can see, just knowing districts in Maine, that there's going to be places that say there are the keys, and here's when I want them done, and that's okay. There's no right answer for that.
Thank you, Brian. Just for clarification, in my mind, I'm trying to get this. I recognize if the districts do some of the work or parse out some of the work themselves, it is going to be very dependent on what's available in their immediate community. But I'm trying to think industry wide. Is there an industry, anybody in the industry that's prepared to take on this type of work if the decision was made that everything would be subbed out and contracted based on an RFP? And you're familiar with the state procurement process. You go out to bid, you have specifications and a requirement. Do you feel like there's somebody or anybody that's prepared to take this on and be able to do it within 6 months, 9 months, 1 year? And the reason I ask is I think the committee really is looking for a date and when this should be implemented by. And we've, at least for now, we're talking about the crossing arms, and then the anti-pinch sensors, I think, will be a later discussion. So for right now, crossing arms, is that something that you think could be done by January 1st of 27?
It would be very tough. I think there's a lot of places that think they can do that, but knowing the state of Maine and knowing school districts and knowing schedules, I just think it's a horrible idea, to be very honest. I would, and a perfect example, I would love to sell every bus to every school district in Maine, and nothing would create more turmoil than doing that. Because when you tell Chris, this is the bus you need, and this has to be this way, and that bus goes to Wayne, it's a very different discussion. And I think both, speaking for them, for Matt and Cliff at O'Connor and DeVivo, everybody has relationships, everybody has equipment they're familiar with. And when you put outside parties in there that aren't used to working with those technicians and those fleets, things become a lot more challenging. And I think you really want somebody that knows the state of Maine and knows those schedules. I don't know, and is going to be around to fix it. You don't want to bring in a third party that will install these and leave, because that'll create sort of issues too. So if it were up to me, and I know it's not, I'd have anyone interested put together a proposal, submit it, and let those districts choose what system and what vendor was going to provide that. It's sort of like we do with the Maine school bus program. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here from Jason King.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey, good, Jason. How are you?
Good. You said it was a terrible idea, but I'm down at the back of the room and I couldn't hear what. So you said terrible idea on what part?
January 1st.
Yeah,
On the timeline? The dual pin sensors,
I think
crossing arms.
I think the terrible idea was putting a very tight single source RFP together on any of the retrofits.
Another question I have is on the crossing arm on retrofitting, the buses that don't have them. And this might be, something that's, too far into the future to determine whether it makes a difference or not. But these buses, are you cutting into the bumper or is the bumper being replaced? What does that look like?
Often, the bumpers that come on the buses have the hardware orifices in them already, so you can slide that air, an electric motor or an air actuator on there. So there's not a whole lot of disturbing the bumper that needs to happen.
Gotcha. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Brian. We appreciate what you're saying, and so we have to report back, and so we're not trying to put it on any one person, but we have to report back to the Transportation Committee. The date they settled on already was January 1st of 27, just for crossing arms. Is that completely unreasonable? Is that not doable within this industry? And this is a best guess. We recognize you don't control it all. But I want to be able to tell them that we've discussed it both with vendors and ourselves, and we feel like the timeline is too compressed or not. And part of that is asking the experts in the industry, can this be pulled off in 9 months, 1 year? Is this a 2-year project? Recognizing there's probably 1,500 buses that are going to have to be touched to do the crossing arms alone.
I think with multiple vendors and some options for the schools doing it themselves, subbing it out, et cetera, you could do the crossing arms by the end of this year, by January 27.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Hey, Brian, Steve Markey. Given your estimates to do the crossing arms and sensors and the range that you provided, do you think it would be somewhere in the $8.25 million range to $12.6 million range, rather than the $6 million that has been discussed previously?
So we're looking, sorry, I don't have my calculator out. We're looking 1,500.
Power on. USB enabled.
I mean, if just looking at the crossing gates, if you took 1,500 buses and it was going to cost mid-range $1,500, that's $2.25 million. And again, the retrofit on the doors, you took 2,400 buses and we used say we said $2,000. That's 4.8. So you're just with those real rough numbers, you're up over 7 million.
Yeah, what I used was the 2,500 to 4,000 per unit for the doors, and the crossing arms 1,500 to 2,000 is what I thought I heard you say. So that's how I came up with my numbers, but. 8.25 to 12.6, just using your original range, but I just wanted to throw out that number just so this committee could be looking at, was the estimate accurate or doable? And that was one of the questions that school administrators had as well, is will you actually be able to do it under the framework of the support by the state? Or would it go beyond that? So this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so doing really quick math, if the budget's 5.9 million, that really only allows for about $2,900, maybe $3,000 per bus for everything. So good information. I know Matt was here as well, and so if Matt wants to jump on and try to provide any information that he feels is relevant or answer any of the questions that we had sent, that would be great to try to get some input from Matt as well.
Yeah, thank you. Brian really covered everything. He did great. The numbers that he provided are fairly accurate from our standpoint and from our brand of bus, the IC bus, and dealership wise. So I feel those numbers are very accurate. Timeline wise, I agree January 1st is probably tight, but possibly doable for the installation specifically of crossing gates. The other consideration would be when the funding is available. I think it was brought up earlier, when the funding of the would be available to the districts to pay for this. And does that affect the timeline? Because a district may not be able to front that money at a few $1,000s per bus for their entire fleet, and they do need to wait for that state funding. So does that impact the installation timeline at all? But in terms of reliability and everything that Brian talked about, I agree with everything that he said and don't have anything additional to add from my perspective.
Thank you, Matt. So I think we're comfortable with the crossing arms. And I am not comfortable at all. I don't want to speak to the group about anti-pinch sensors and timeframes. That sounds like we really would not be able to provide much guidance right now to the legislature on timing. We're still in development phase.
Yes.
You're standing on a couple of different types of buses. And there's only about 100 school buses in Maine that are 2025 and newer, which means you're talking at least 2,400 buses, if not more, if we were going to try to retrofit. I'm not trying to discourage it. I think it's great technology when it's working and working well. But I want to be realistic when we at least try to report back as a commission with a timeline, because this money will become available. We don't know when either. We don't know how it's going to be distributed. But we want to make sure that we recommend things that we get the most bang for our buck and the best safety. So timeline number one on if the commission thought the anti-pinch sensor should be retrofitted, is there a rough estimate that you would feel comfortable with as an industry, whether it be 1 year, 2 years? For the first question, and I'll pause for a minute and I got another one.
So I think given Andrew's rough timeline of the start of the 27-28 school year is probably the best estimate that we can give, given that you're not going to see production till Q4 of 26 or through Q2 of 27. And we're going to have to rely heavily on a third party like Miser for this product, because especially for retrofit, there's not a lot of OEM supported option there. And then there was the topic that he brought up about the Collins buses and the microbirds, that there haven't been discussion yet on those products at all with the OEM to even start working on a product for them. And there are those buses in the state that we would have to deal with. So when he spoke about the stuff that's already in the works for IC Bus and Thomas, we're not even talking about the stuff that's not in the works yet and what the additional time would need to be for those additional buses. And there are other off brands that are out there as well. So it's definitely, I definitely think we're into that 2028 time frame for anti-pinch, if that's something that they really, the legislature really wants to move forward with.
Okay. So thank you for that information. That's important because what I'm hearing and feeling is that we're just not sure. And the technology, while it exists, is still being worked out. That we're not prepared to do it for every bus. If we had all the money in the world right now, money was no object or issue, we still could guarantee to pull this off within a year or two if school year 27, 28 really will come fast.
Absolutely.
I struggle with making that type of commitment and recognizing that if we don't make it, we're literally putting buses out of service and not being able to use them. So I appreciate that. Let me ask both of you, Matt and Brian, is there other technology that we should be considering, whether it's in addition to or instead of, that would work as well, whether it be proximity sensors, whether it be some type of different system that maybe AI-enabled cameras? Is there something else that we should be looking at in lieu of or in addition to make this recommendation back? Because I feel like there's more technology that should be explored, even if it's point forward. And I didn't know if either of you had advice for us on that.
Yeah, so I think just from the kind of the list that you had shared, 360-degree cameras jumped out at me. And that's a readily available option that's out there by a couple different vendors. Given my experience as a bus driver and a transportation director, yes, the technology is helpful, but then now you're expecting the driver to now look at a screen to check their surroundings instead of focusing at the door and in their mirrors and looking at these places where they should be focusing, and we train them to focus. So if they're not looking down at the door to make sure there's nobody in the door when they're closing it, they're looking at a screen, whether it's an additional screen or a screen that may be located in their overhead driver mirror. We're now pulling their attention away from those areas that are dangerous to be looking somewhere else. So yes, it may help you see a little bit more, but are we really distracting the driver by doing that as well?
Kind of like the backup camera in your car. If you rely on that alone, we're in trouble.
Same thing, right? And we have backup cameras in the buses, and it's the same idea. Like it's an additional tool, but is it always helpful for them? Crash avoidance systems, I mean, those you're looking at more forward facing. They can come with pedestrian detection in front of the bus. It does just only help with that side of the bus. We do make downlit, like illuminated mirrors that help in the dark, again, just on the front side of the bus. There is pedestrian lighting that you can get on the side of the bus. It's required in Canada right now for additional pedestrian lighting down the side of the bus to just illuminate that side of the bus. So that is readily available. So there are a lot of options. I think I would just try and reiterate, as I did in my letter, that I think the focus and making sure that there's funding for getting back to the fundamentals of the driver training and really focusing on supporting the drivers and making sure that there is enough professional development made for them annually. I feel that 16 hours is not enough. And providing that additional training to help support them in their roles and understand all of these things that we're talking about better, and refreshing that with them more often will just help them make them better, safer drivers. So I would really like to see that we talk about these numbers just for equipment, but is there going to be additional funding from the state to the districts to be able to add more professional development for drivers? We spend a lot on it for our educators. I think we need to now start focusing on our transportation staff as well, and increasing that professional development for them and treating them like the professionals that we want them to be, and we feel that they are.
Thank you, Matt. That was well said. Brian, was there anything else by way of technology we should be looking at? I know we talked about a micro lock. And so you're feeling, if I captured it correctly, and I just want to clarify in my mind, you wouldn't recommend it for each stop in the general location. You thought that it was safe for like the handicap buses that had the ramps set up, that when the door opened, the ramp started to activate, it automatically locked the system. You're thinking that it worked well in the environment for the handicap ramps, but it would not work well in the environment of every bus stop. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think of malfunctions, and I think with a wheelchair lift, it's federally required, so we don't have a dog in that fight. But FMVSS 403 and 404 require certain lighting and interlocks for lifts and lift doors, and that's been out there for years. It's not a difficult technology, and everybody, it's on both school buses and commercial vehicles too. But I get the feeling, talking to our OEM and the compliance people, and also, having driven a school bus and owned a bus company, you don't want to immobilize a school bus in the road. You think of emergency vehicles and railroad tracks and a million different circumstances. And to me, anything that locks that vehicle when you open up the service door, however well-intentioned that may be, I don't think overall it makes those kids any safer. I really don't. And I absolutely reiterate everything that Matt said. There's nothing, it sounds strange for people selling and working on vehicles, but there's nothing here I can do that's important to the safety of those kids as the driver, and how they conduct themselves and what they do. And training to that end is way more important.
Thank you for that. I don't have any more questions, and out of respect for time, I'm going to stop asking things that I can think of. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to kind of have us look at the agenda right now. Obviously, we are at time right now. We intended to have some time built into the schedule so we can talk about 29A and recommendations, and also to sort of consider what we've heard from folks presented to us. Recognizing the timing, what I'd like to do is sort of shift to talking about agenda setting for our next meeting, which is Thursday, and identifying what tasks need to happen between now and Thursday. The other piece that Bruce and I discussed briefly before our meeting began was, so our next meeting, the intention was really to shift our focus from specifications, bus specifications, and into looking at driver training and looking at, even driver's licensing, but certainly driver training, and, to Chris's point that he made earlier, sort of an established curriculum, training, and then enforcement mechanisms relating to training. Recognizing that we have not had a moment to get to sort of recommendations related to specifications, I do think we're going to need to build time into to our next meeting on Thursday, the 19th, to discuss those specifications. So what I'd like to talk maybe about with the commission right now about is adding a fifth meeting. One of the components we had discussed was one of the reasons that we had such a compressed schedule between now and March 27th was really with our intention of making sure that we could get a report back to the Transportation Committee, who have needed to kind of move even faster than, an early April report back. So my concern is there are still a number of areas that we need to address and gather and determine recommendations in order to meet the mandate from the executive order that established this commission. And I am very concerned that we're not going to be able to do that in the time we have. The fourth meeting was really intended to focus on those final recommendations that could be used to be incorporated into a report. And I'm just not sure that we're going to be able to get there. So what I would be recommending is that we spend the meeting next Thursday talking through the specifications with our homework between now and Thursday of looking at 29A in terms of some of the areas that we heard today about, what specifications would we be recommending. We certainly know what is going to be brought back to the Transportation Committee relative to the language we talked about. But what we're really thinking about are 29A, those statutes, but also Chapter 86 of the Department of Education rule that sort of speaks to the bus specifications. So we'd be asking people to sort of look at those and flag what is missing based on what we've learned so far. And the recommendation would be that we would spend at least an hour of the meeting next Thursday on specifications and then get into either licensing or driver training. My thinking is probably initiating sort of a conversation about driver training, about what exists. So when we talk about driver training, we're also talking about training for transportation directors as well. And looking at what needs to be sort of included in rule. And then the meeting on the 27th, which is our fourth meeting, would continue the discussion of training. And then we'd add a fifth meeting to really go over and finalize recommendations.
Could I don't know if this is a motion or whatever, but maybe a suggestion that 2 hours might not be enough for some of this. It seems like last time we had a lot of great discussion, and this time a lot of very great. We have a broad talk, even though it's fairly narrow in the grand scheme of all the laws out there. It seems like we have a lot to talk about, and I know some of us come from incredible distances, right, for example, just in general. And would it be worthy of examining the ability to have more time, maybe as a group, per session? Is that just all of that?
No, I think it's a great idea. We don't have to really have the official vote, but if there's some consensus in the room, this room is booked 8 to 12 for these purposes. So anytime within that, we certainly can extend. And if we decided to go beyond it, I could ask. But I know we got 8 to 12, and I'm perfectly good with adding an hour to this because I agree. What we think we can do much quicker, we have not. And I would rather do another hour 3 times than have that 5th meeting, because if the last meeting is the 27th, it's still not a lot of time to massage a really good report back. So if everyone else is thinking along those lines, Chris, I'm totally good.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
I will see your hour and raise you a hold on our calendars for a 5th meeting so that we're not scrambling at the last minute, but that will be in place in the event that the magical 3rd hour doesn't fix things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a great idea. Yeah. Just at our next meeting, I have to meet with representatives from our 6 towns at 1 o'clock that day in Alfred. So I will likely have to leave at about 11:20 at the very latest.
So a question could be, and I'm now looking at Wayne and other people who drive great distances, is starting earlier.
I don't have a problem with that because I come down the night before.
Start pretty close enough.
Could we do 8:30 to 11:30?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll aim for 8:30 to 11:30 on both the 19th and the 27th. And then if we can look out to, would Friday, April 3rd from 8:30 to 11:30 work again with folks?
Yeah, April 3rd.
April 3rd.
Oh, April 3rd.
Yeah, April 3rd.
Yeah, that looks good for me.
Any chance to do April 2nd instead?
Still good.
I am not.
Okay.
I'm not able to do that. Do we want to look at
The 10th still gives 3 weeks for the final report back, but it would give us a week in between. We're out 8 grants. Okay. 9?
Yeah, I'm out.
I'm out. I'm out at 8.
I will just have another super covered for me for the executive committee, so I'll just be here on the 3rd. I'll make an adjustment. So.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so we'll go back to April 3rd from 8:30 to 11:30. That work? Okay. So again, the sort of homework that we're sort of assigning folks is again looking at the specifications in chapter 86 and in 29A. And I think that we would probably also need to talk a little bit or have people review chapter 81, which speaks to some of the training. All of those I think can be found in our binder. Is that correct, Lieutenant?
Yes, chapter 81 and 86.
Okay, so you can find all those in the binders. Again, for when we're thinking about bus driver training, what we're thinking about is 16 hours a year. We don't have mandated criterion or mandated curriculum of what has to be trained. We also don't have a system in place for tracking. Well, there is a report that has to be completed, but we want to kind of speak to that. So that'll be sort of, again, we'll finish on specifications next week, and then we'll begin our discussions about training.
Yeah, just can you clarify? You used the term specifications, and I'm not quite sure. Are you saying the portions of 29A that are provided in our binder, and we're limiting the discussion to those portions? Because there's dozens of other school bus provisions in 29A. So is it just what we were given at the onset of the commission? Is that what we want to talk about?
That was my understanding.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, but I would say if there's any statute in 29A that we feel as a commission should be addressed, that would be important to report back. I don't want to miss anything if there's something somebody's thinking of. So 29A is a big book. The statutory requirements 2301 to 2311 are just school bus specific. But I think when you're talking specifications, there's school bus specifications too, with the National Congress and the 500-page manual that gets pulled into that. So there's a lot there. But if there's something in 28 that you're thinking about, Director, we want to hear it, especially licensing.
There are penalty aspects. There's penalties on the drivers. We talked a little bit last meeting about other motorists. So I don't know if we really want to neck down to get ourselves through this initial deliverable back to, based on our initial charter, is what you put, what's in the binder. Then I would say we limit it to that, and then the rest of 29A, if the commission is now a standing body, that future meetings could be used to provide inputs into the legislature by 1 February on other 29A aspects that could be adjusted. But in the interest of time and delivery, I would say, just since we're all kind of already provided the material, we focus on that portion of 29A. Makes sense in the binder.
That's my thinking, but I think one of the things that I will do between now and Monday is reread the executive order to make sure that the section of 29A that we have included adequately addresses what has been mandated in the executive order in terms of what we need to do.
I was looking at that just a minute ago, and I mean, what's the executive order is what Bruce verbalized a minute ago, which is anything you think we need to change. Well, the question is, how much time do we have to address everything, or do we want to focus and get good now on this piece, and we can take on the rest later?
And I like that. You've looked at the executive order.
Well, I mean, I just glanced back through it, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, all those verbs, right?
Yeah.
It's
Also, just a side note, I know that I don't know if Cheryl write this online. Remote.
No, she's flying.
Okay, just a side note, she was going to forward a copy of the Congress, the updated version to us. Indicated that at the last meeting, and there are some people here that aren't familiar with that. So I just want to make sure that everybody does get the appropriate documentation. That'll discuss those things.
Jeff, I think you're online. If you're able to get that, send that to me. I'll get that out to the commission.
Did you get a copy of
I personally have one. I know that I thought she's going to share with the group as a whole. So they can,
if you can share it with me,
sure,
then I will make sure I distribute it. We'll also, everything that we are sharing here, we are also adding to our website to make sure that members of the public are also able to see what we are reviewing. So once it is shared, I'll email it out to everyone, but then we'll also post it on our website. All right. Other questions, comments?
Lieutenant, you're gonna check with Danielle from, or do you?
No, all set. I've got it from 8 to 12. If we were going to go before or after.
No, on the 3rd, for April 3rd.
Oh, copy that. Yeah. You can check with her if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, April 3rd.
Just to make sure before we all go.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you go through that door right there, you go
to the information.
I think I got the golden key.
All right. And whoever's behind the window over there, they can schedule it too. You don't have to find Danielle. Just go right here.
And if you find out if we're gonna be drilling again, that's been great.
I know.
Yeah.
But at least we know now how to turn
How to
that
turn that
on.
on. I really
I
enjoyed it.
pushed that 4 or 5 times. It didn't do anything, but when you hold it, like you're choking it out,
Right.
eventually the light turned on.
Okay, great, good to know.
We found the key is to hold the light.
We'll get it all ironed out by meeting 5. All right.
Can I just have one more quick one? So
Yeah.
for on 2159,
Yes.
in the establishment of the commission, you know, perpetuity,
Yes.
do you want to either add something that says that the chairs may assign other members to participate as necessary, some sort of authority? What pops to my mind right now is a buddy person, right? So we're having these discussions. There's a number that the governor's floated. How does that actually execute fiscally, right? Do we want a budgetary person or a procurement person to pull in as needed? Do you guys want to have the authority so that somebody doesn't second guess us later on that, hey, you can't add that person, it's not in the statute?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking the same thing. Is there like just be talking about laws? Is there like legal
An
perspective?
AG.
AG, just I
There
mean,
you go. Yeah.
it's made it bigger than it has to be, but I mean, just to draw through something where they can do some research for us a little bit.
Or Bruce, maybe that's like how the Secretary of State, you know, may be invited as well as the Attorney General's office, Maine revenue, or not revenue, but budget, you know, there's maybe a representative sample or just an open-ended authority to do what you guys need to do.
Yeah, I like adding at least a note. So if we're all set with the room, Deb?
Yeah.
We're all set with the room. Great, thank you. I do like the idea of us, the commission, having the authority to add, but I also like the idea of being able to remove as well. If this is going to be a permanent commission, it's really hard to make a permanent commission and say you shall when there's those that are here that aren't paid. And it may be okay that everybody is here is being paid by their agency or their organization, but if there was somebody that wasn't, that would be a concern too. So
The other piece I would add is that another consideration is having someone who is currently a bus driver serving on the commission. That was some feedback we received, and again, that can be captured in other people. Yeah.
I like that. And
I
under
was
the,
just thinking, oh, sorry, Ted.
I was going to say under the duties, I had already asked them to add an I and then say and other issues or concerns that the commission becomes aware of. So that way we can talk about anything else within scope.
Just also, I don't know who determined who spoke today, the 3 that were fantastic that spoke, but we did leave one person on that. Chase, he's our Woodward representative for the state. Okay. Just brought to my attention that he would like some time in front of the meeting as well.
Okay. You think they'll time in on the 19th?
Yeah, the sales reps, the buses really are an integral part of our operation every single day. They're almost like an extension of our staff.
Yeah, so the reason those people were selected, those are the ones that reached out. That said that they'd like to be heard. And so we definitely want to hear from everybody who can provide us good guidance. So thank you for that.
I will. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Yes.
Comment and question. Exceptionally, I know you guys probably were challenged at this end of the table, but back here, I'm more than half the meeting. Just no way to understand what anybody was saying, including you all, really, some of you. But the other compliment you on well-run meeting, though. I mean, you guys really did some efficient work here. So sit through a lot of these things, and good, well. Are these meetings? I know they're Zoom, but are they available to the public after the fact?
Yes, they're recorded, and we will get this posted. It's through our YouTube channel that it's on. There's a website we have opened on the Department of Education. So just go to the Department of Education's website, and on the top banner, it is still one of the top banners that will take you right to the webpage. And we are posting public comment. We're also posting any documents that we're looking at, and we're also posting the recordings of this meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, sir, I didn't catch your name earlier. I apologize.
Tim Walton
from
Interested Party.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Well, I would say thank you for the comments, Tim. We echo your feelings. it's frustrating. We think we have everything done. We come an hour early, we do sound checks, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. So I think we're better. We get this figured out.
I'll give you a hand on the appropriations for this policy budget.
You're a good man, and we appreciate that. Thank you for being here.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So,
And second? Chris? All right, all in favor of adjourning? Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.